Chapter 2, Management Theory. This is a good book. It has some good history according to management theory. I realized that was redundant, but I had to turn the mic off and cough. So, 8 questions asked or defined here in this chapter. We're going to try to answer each one of those. The payoff for studying different management perspectives. If the name of the game is to manage work more efficiently, what can the classical viewpoint teach us? How about the behavioral viewpoint? We'll look at 2 top quantitative approaches, and we can look at a systems viewpoint, which is a whole different way of looking at it. And we finally ask that question, is there one best way to manage in all situations? And then, can quality management viewpoint offer guidelines to true managerial success? And finally, we look at organizations must learn or perish. How do I build a learning organization? And I think this last one right here is the key. You must have an organic organization that's going to be a learning organization to grow. But let's get into this and find out what we have here. So why should you be studying this stuff? It's like past history. So first of all, if you look at the past, you can understand what we're doing today in the present. We can use this as a guide to action as to what worked and what didn't work. We can use it for a source of new ideas. And finally, we can look at clues to the meaning of your manager's decisions and outside ideas. Sometimes we seriously do not understand who the person who is directing or who we report to, why they make the decisions they make. Possibly understanding some of these theories will explain that for everybody. Finally, we look at evidence-based management, and that basically is a rational approach to managing, sort of a scientific way. And we're going to look at it from the historical perspective and from the contemporary perspective. Historically, it's going to be the classic. These have all been, categories have been laid out. There's the classical way to manage, the behavioral way, quantitative. And then we'll look at more contemporary versions of systems, contingency, and quality management. And this is kind of a breakdown. Let's see if I can get it all on the screen. Maybe not. Here's your classical view, and scientific management and administrative management falls underneath that. You have the behavioral viewpoint, and we have the earlier behaviorists, human relation movement, and the behavioral science approach. And then we look at the quantitative viewpoint, management science, and operation management. From your classical viewpoint, here's some of the history that breaks down to it. Early in the 1900s, during the Industrial Age, we started motion studies by Frederick Taylor. And what he did was evaluate the task, select the best worker, train that worker, and then use scientific principles to set up their work area. And it worked. This was actually the first time a worker was evaluated as part of the process, trying to adapt the work environment for the worker to a certain extent. That followed, oh, look at that frowny. That wasn't supposed to happen. So that should be that. And I'll give it a space. There. Then we looked at functions, and Fayot was the first to come up with planning, organizing, leading, and controlling as a function of administration. And Weber came up with bureaucracy. We probably should send him a thank you card. And it had hierarchy of authority. It had to have rules and procedures. There was a division of labor, and there was impersonality, and careers were made on merit. This is the bureaucracy's kind of a blueprint for many of the companies, large companies, still existing today. Think IBM, Coca-Cola, GM, those companies. They still kind of follow this. A lot of education Institutions follow that also. There's a bureaucracy to it. The bigger they get, the more bureaucracy you have. Problems? One of the main problems with the industrial age development was it was very mechanistic. Workers were a cog. There wasn't much value to them other than the fact that they were a part of the process. So their value and their self-esteem was not taken into consideration. So there was a lot of problem with motivating. And the more motivated you can get your people, obviously, the better your production and probably the better your product. So there are still several industries today using some of these methods. We then moved on to behavioralism, and there was some early behavioralism with Munsterberg, and he ID'd the psychological factors of workers and applied them. And there was Margaret Follett, who really brought forth a lot of interesting ideas about workers, that the factory should be a community and that workers should be involved in the management, sort of a worker-centered production. And we had Mayo, who did the Hawthorne Effect, which we're going to watch a movie on that. And the Hawthorne Effect literally found out that just by watching people, you could improve or change their behavior, which wasn't the original thing they set out to prove in that study. But it's kind of interesting to watch, and we did learn. Maslow, of course, I think we all know of Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, which starts with psychological and the safety, the love, the esteem, and as each one of these needs is met, we move up the pyramid and finally get to self-actualization. And then we had the XY theory by McGregor in 1960, and that theory was managers either viewed their workers negatively or positively, and there was no in between. And that makes a big difference on how workers respond, is how your managers view them. The issue or the problem with much of the behavioralism, it was way too simple. It didn't explain the variables. So we moved then to let's go back up here, what they call the quantitative viewpoint. And that involved a lot of statistics, simulations, and management science. We used math to make decisions. We made mathematical models and did simulations to predict what would happen with some production. This was called rational management. And operational management really dealt with the system or the product. We had production, scheduling, planning, location. A lot of JIT, just in time, came out of this. It was all in coordination. It was almost, one of the problems with this was it was too planned. There wasn't enough flexibility in it. It kind of got set in stone. So those are our early historic development of management, and we can come down now to more contemporary view, which is the systems viewpoint, the contingency viewpoint, and the quality management viewpoint. The systems viewpoint looked at anything in any organization, anything we do as a system, and that system involved inputs, the process, outputs, and then feedback. And all of these systems were interrelated, and you could have a closed system with no feedback in an organization. Usually an organization, it's very difficult for it to be totally closed, or an open system that continually reacts with the environment and grows. So we looked at that, and then you had the contingency viewpoint, which really said the manager's approach should vary according to what's needed to the individual or the environment. They should be very flexible. So management decisions aren't set in stone, but they're always in process and they're always growing. It's sort of a whatever it takes attitude. And you take each case, each incident or each decision case by case. This one is really handy in if you're in a fast-paced environment. Then you have the quality management viewpoint. We've all heard a lot about total quality management and quality assurance. It was kind of designed by Deming. And he actually tried to implement this in the United States, and they wouldn't talk with him, so he went to Japan and pretty well turned Japan upside down, and almost turned the United States upside down in the auto industry, because Japan whooped us with manufacturing for quite a few years. The principles out of TQM are continuous improvement, employee involvement, listening and learning, and accurate standards, and it's just a continual feedback. Employees are very involved in the process. Which brings us to today. And one of the main things that's being said today about operations and management is organizations must learn or perish. And the really big question becomes, how do I build a learning organization? And a learning organization is one that actively creates, acquires, and transfers knowledge. That's something nobody can mimic. Nobody can steal your ideas, or nobody can, absolutely mimic what you do, as long as you continue to grow in your learning organization. There are 3 roles for a manager, and that's to build a commitment to learning, to generate ideas with impact, and then to generalize ideas with impact. It's very important to take those ideas and turn them into something that is going to have an impact, and to be flexible about it. And we have an interview about this one. So we have several additional resources that will help us understand these. And that takes care of Chapter 4, and I believe we've answered all 8 of those objectives. Have a good evening.